Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was one of the most praised German authors of his time. Louisa May Alcott was a big Goethe fan. In the middle of the novel, Werther leaves Lottie and Albert and travels away. He gets a position as an ambassador's assistant, but the work does not satisfy him or the duties that comes with it. He struggles to fit into the high society because he feels that his individuality is being smothered by the fake facade. He compares his wealthy associates to the poor people who were so kind to him. Werther sees that the nature of the person does not matter in the society, but only wealth and status does, which leads into inevitable conflict with the aristocrats, and as a result he is reminded by his supporters that on such occasions, going with the whim of the society is the way to go. Werther's behavior becomes the topic of the gossip among those who have envied his position, and Werther is so upset he would like to, quote, stab a knife into his heart. Goethe lived during the time when neo-humanism became mainstream philosophy. One of the more important aspects of neo-humanism was the idea of self. What is more important, the sense of self, the personal values, and the moral codes, or in the end, is our value only measured by our wealth and status? The idea of being one, authentic self, was part of the transcendentalist philosophy. Werther's inner struggles with his self-worth being measured by things that he has no control over, like his family background, is reprised in Little Woman when Jo and Friedrich participate into the social gathering of artists, poets, and intellectuals. Jo has a moment of clarity when the people who she has been admiring from afar show the true nature of themselves, and it is far from flattering. This becomes a pinning point between her and Friedrich, because his speech on religion goes right into her soul. Jo often despised the higher class gatherings, and was even afraid to be invited into such events. This is caused by Jo's preconceptions about the higher class, but also her unique sense of self and the way her parents have shown her the living conditions of the less fortunate. The idea of self and self-worth appears in Jo's and Friedrich's discussion about writing, and when he reminds Jo that if she, Jo, wants to be a successful writer, first she needs to find her own voice, and as a result Jo begins to search her own style. This is where Werther and Laurie separate. Despite the fact that Laurie has grown up in the world that was filled with these high-class social gatherings, he is not against them. In fact, he enjoys participating to parties and dinners. Amy has always enjoyed such gatherings. Laurie grew up in that world, so he does not have any disillusions about it. But it is only with his relationship with Amy he begins to understand the privileges of his own position. This is a quote from Liisa Saariluoma, professor of literature. Even before Werther falls in love to Lottie, he knew that their love was doomed because she was engaged. For Werther, being unhappily in love was something that he was pursuing from the beginning. For Werther, being unhappily in love, falling in love with Lottie was a self-destroying path from the start, because Werther knew that even love cannot save him from a life without meaning. Everything that Lottie represents to Werther, the warm atmosphere, the sense of home, or memories from his childhood and his first love, is secondary compared to his addiction for the emotional stress. Lottie cannot save him from the conditions that he must live or that he refuses to find a meaning for his life, and instead he makes Lottie the only reason for his living, and their relationship changes from friendship to emotional blackmailing.
Are now available as books. You can find them as paperbacks and ebooks. They are wonderful reading for all the fans of Louisa May Alcott. You can find all the links from the description. And now, back to the show.
Werther's love for Lottie is the same love he feels when he is with children or the peasants, because they erect something inside him, harmony, which is not something he has been able to find from the high society. When Werther returns to Lottie and Albert, they are now a married couple. They treat Werther with friendliness. but his moods are uncontrollable. He knew that the marriage was about to happen, but it only fused to his distress. The country idyll and the harmony that he was so in love with is utterly broken. Young woman who he was friends with had lost their child, and her husband had returned and lost their inheritance. A young peasant boy, a friend of Werther, had sexually abused his mistress. Even nature does not comfort Werther. Seeing the hazel trees he had admired with Lottie make him furious. Lottie becomes angry at Werther, accusing him for choosing her from all the other women, when he knew that she was engaged to somebody else. She and Albert try to calm him down, and she tries to figure out how they could make him to be more sensible. This is a quote from Little Woman. "I can't love anyone else. I can't forget you, Joe. Never. What shall I do with him?" sighed Joe, finding that emotions were more unmanageable than she expected. "You haven't heard what I wanted to tell you. Sit down and listen, for indeed I want to do right and make you happy," she said, hoping to soothe him with a little reason, which proved that she knew nothing about love. When Werther has made his final decision, Lottie is very nervous when she goes to meet him. In Little Woman, when Joe decides that it is time to tell Laurie to stop, she is very nervous. Werther reads Lottie Death of Ossian, which is a poem by James Macpherson, and all the passages handle death and grief, and they are very sentimental. Werther becomes very abusive. Everything passes away, but a whole eternity could not extinguish the living flame. She is mine. Yes, Charlotta, you're mine forever. Werther doesn't listen anything that Lottie says, and then he shoots himself. This is what Laurie says. "Don't tell me that, Joe. I can't bear it now. That you love that old man, that devilish professor you were always writing about. If you say you love him, I know I shall do something desperate."
As you will, you'll meet some good-for-nothing, no-account idiot, and you'll fall in love with him and work and live and die for him. I know you will. It's your way. And I'll have to stand by and see it.
When Laurie says that, there comes a time when Joe will find someone else, and that he rather dies than sees it. This is Joe's brilliant response, which I must say is never in Little Woman movies. "Yes, I will live and die for him, if he ever comes and makes me love him, in spite of myself, and you must do the best you can. I've done my best, but you won't be reasonable, and it's selfish of you to keep teasing me for what I can't give. I shall always be fond of you, very fond indeed, as a friend, but I'll never marry you, and the sooner you believe it, the better for the both of us." In Little Woman, Jo actively tries to partner Laurie to each one of her sisters, because she earnestly wants Laurie to be her brother. First with Meg because she is in the age, and in part 2, first to Beth and later to Amy, even before Jo knew that Amy and Laurie were rekindling their friendship in Europe. For the modern viewer, Jo's desire to marry Laurie to any one of her sisters might come out as fear of commitment, but the real reason is actually what Louisa writes in the proposal chapter. Jo at that point did not know yet what love was, but she knew that she was not in love with Laurie, and that she wanted to be with someone who she could love truly and with her whole heart. Throughout the book series, Jo is shown as a maternal figure who saves young boys from being lost, and in Jo's eyes, without her family's care, Laurie will be lost. Both Werther and Little Woman flip the pattern of the traditional romance novel because the female protagonist wants someone better, a partner who is more suitable for them than the overly emotional guy who is pursuing them and whose advances make them feel uncomfortable. Werther was a massively popular book among the German youth when it appeared. Young men even dressed like Werther, wearing a yellow vest and a blue jacket, and it inspired thousands of young men and women to commit suicide. And many were angry at Lottie for rejecting Werther. Does this sound familiar to Little Woman fans? Werther's way to self-destruction is pervasive and all-compassing. His desire to live fulfilling, meaningful, inspirational life is replaced with the belief that it cannot be possible. Werther's inner conflicts have been often explained with his status, that his unhappiness is caused by the fact that he cannot live a simpler life because he was born as an aristocrat. More contemporary interpretation is that Werther sees no meaning in his life. In his biography, Goethe writes about his inspirations for Werther, that the boredom towards life troubled his generation, and the popular literature of the time was all about death and disappearance. Emily and I discussed about this in our Laurie episode. It is a shame that Laurie's character arc is missing from Every Little Woman adaptations because the lack of meaning and not really knowing what you want to be or what you want to do with your life, that is a topic that a lot of young people still today can identify with.